I froze. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Just 10 minutes ago, I had kissed my wife goodbye at the airport, wishing her a safe trip. I thought I was the luckiest man in Seattle. I thought I had the perfect marriage. But then my 8-year-old son, who had been sitting quietly in the back seat, leaned forward and whispered 7 words that shattered my entire reality. He didn't ask for ice cream. He didn't ask for his iPad. He whispered, "Dad, we can't go home tonight." What happened next didn't just break my heart. It nearly cost us our lives. This is a story about betrayal, survival, and the terrifying intuition of a child. Before we dive into this nightmare, if you believe that children see things adults often miss, hit that like button right now. And if you enjoy true stories about resilience and justice, make sure to subscribe to Inspiration Seeker and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss how this ends. It started like any other Tuesday in the Pacific Northwest, gray, drizzly, and routine. I was driving my 2018 sedan down the I-5 toward Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Beside me in the passenger seat was Sarah, my wife, the woman I had shared my life with for 10 years. I remember looking over at her and thinking how beautiful she looked. She was dressed in her charcoal business suit, checking emails on her phone, looking every bit the successful corporate consultant she claimed to be. She told me she was heading to Chicago for a week-long leadership conference. It was a big deal for her career, or at least, that's what she had told me over dinner the night before. "I put an extra casserole in the fridge for you and Leo," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Her palm was warm, her smile reassuring. "Make sure he does his math homework, okay? Don't let him play video games all night, Mark." I laughed, assuring her I had everything under control. "Don't worry, honey. We'll hold down the fort. You just knock him dead in Chicago." In the back seat, our 8-year-old son, Leo, was unusually quiet. Usually, he'd be begging to play music or asking a million questions about airplanes. Today, he was just staring out the rain-streaked window, clutching his backpack against his chest. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just assumed he was sad that his mom was leaving for a week. Kids get moody, right? We pulled up to the departure curb at Terminal 4. The area was chaotic with travelers, honking taxis, and shuttle buses. I put the car in park and hopped out to grab her suitcase from the trunk. Sarah walked around, gave Leo a quick wave through the glass, and then turned to me. She wrapped her arms around my neck, pulling me close. I could smell her vanilla perfume, the same scent she wore on our first date. "I love you, Mark," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "I'll call you when I get to the hotel tonight." "Love you too," I replied, giving her a kiss. I watched her walk through the sliding glass doors, her heels clicking on the pavement, merging into the crowd. She didn't look back. Not once. I got back into the driver's seat, let out a deep breath, and put the car in gear. As I merged back onto the highway, the radio was playing a classic rock song, and I felt a sense of contentment. I had a beautiful wife, a healthy son, and a nice house in the suburbs. I truly believed I was living the American dream. I had absolutely no idea that I was driving away from a crime scene and that the person I just hugged was actually sending me home to die. The drive back south on I-5 was mesmerizingly dull at first. The gray clouds over Seattle had opened up, and the rain was now drumming a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the roof of the car. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, counting down the miles to our empty house. I glanced in the rearview mirror to check on Leo. He was still staring out the window, his small hand gripping the door handle, so hard his knuckles were white. The silence in the car started to feel heavy, almost oppressive. I decided to break the tension. "Hey, buddy," I said, keeping my voice cheerful. "Since Mom's gone, how about we break the rules? We can stop for a happy meal on the way home. Maybe rent a movie? What do you say?" I expected a cheer, or at least a smile. Instead, Leo didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just let out a shaky breath that fogged up the glass. "Leo," I asked, frowning. He turned his head slowly. His eyes were wide, filled with the kind of terror that an 8-year-old boy should never know. He unbuckled his seatbelt, something he knew he was never allowed to do while the car was moving, and leaned forward between the two front seats. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. Please, please don't take us home. I let out a nervous chuckle, thinking he was just having separation anxiety. Leo, come on. I know you miss Mom already, but we have to go home. We have school tomorrow. No. He shouted it this time, grabbing my arm. The sudden movement made me jerk the steering wheel slightly, and the car swerved within the lane. I straightened out, my heart racing, ready to scold him, but then I saw the tears streaming down his face. Mom didn't go to Chicago, Dad, he sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush. She's lying. I heard her. Before we left, when she was in the bathroom with the door locked, she was on her burner phone, the one she hides in the laundry basket. My blood ran cold. Burner phone? I heard her talking to a man, Leo continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She said, they'll be alone tonight. Just finish it while they sleep. Make it look like an accident. The insurance money will be enough for us to leave. The world seemed to stop. The sound of the rain faded into a dull roar in my ears. My foot instinctively lifted off the gas pedal. I wanted to tell him he was imagining things, that he had misunderstood a movie or a game. But looking into my son's terrified eyes, I knew this wasn't a child's imagination. This was a warning. And I had a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach that if I turned onto our driveway tonight, we would never drive out again. Denial is a powerful thing. For the next mile or two, my brain tried desperately to reject what my son had just told me. I wanted to believe Leo was just confused, that maybe he had overheard a scene from a TV show Sarah was watching. My wife, a killer? The woman who cried when our goldfish died? It seemed impossible. It seemed insane. But then, the pieces started clicking together in my mind like a horrifying puzzle. The late-night texts she claimed were from work. The way she had been strangely affectionate, yet distant for the last few weeks. And most chilling of all, just last month, she had nagged me incessantly to double my life insurance policy, claiming it was responsible financial planning for Leo's future. I needed to be sure. My hand trembling, I pulled my phone from the center console and speed-dialed Sarah. Ring, ring, click. The subscriber you have reached is not available. Straight to voicemail. That was the first red flag. Sarah never turned her phone off when traveling for business. She was glued to that thing. I called again. Same result. A cold, not a dread, tightened in my stomach. I looked over at Leo. He wasn't crying anymore. He was just watching me, waiting to see if I would protect him. That look, the absolute trust in his eyes, snapped me out of my denial. I couldn't risk it. If there was even a 1% chance, he was right. Going home meant walking into a trap. I took the exit for our suburb, but instead of driving toward our subdivision entrance, I took the back roads. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and black. I killed the headlights as we turned onto our street, letting the car roll slowly through the darkness. Dad, Leo whispered, shrinking into his seat. It's okay, buddy, I said, keeping my voice low. We aren't going in. Instead of pulling into our driveway, I steered the car into a dark cul-de-sac about 100 yards down the road. From this spot, hidden behind a cluster of large oak trees and a heavy veil of rain, we had a direct line of sight to our front porch, but no one at the house could see us. I cut the engine. The silence returned, broken only by the relentless rain hammering on the roof. We sat there in the dark, two fugitives in our own neighborhood. I checked my watch. 8:15 p.m. If nothing happened in 30 minutes, I'd take Leo to a hotel, and we'd laugh about this in the morning. I prayed that I was just being a paranoid fool. I prayed that my son was wrong. But 10 minutes later, my prayers were unanswered. My blood turned to ice as headlights swept across the wet pavement. A black van, battered and missing a front license plate, rolled slowly down the street and stopped, right in front of my house. We sat there, frozen. The windshield was beginning to fog up from our heavy breathing, but I didn't dare turn on the defroster. I wiped a small circle on the glass with my sleeve, my eyes locked on that black van. For a moment, nothing happened. The vehicle just sat there, idling, its exhaust puffing white smoke into the cold, rainy night. Then, the driver's side door creaked open. A figure emerged. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. He wore a heavy hoodie pulled low over his face and a gator mask covering his nose and mouth. This wasn't a delivery driver. This wasn't a neighbor dropping by. He moved with a terrifying purpose, ignoring the rain that was soaking him to the bone. He walked to the back of the van and threw open the rear doors. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird when I saw what he pulled out. 2 large, red jerry cans. He wasn't there to rob us. He wasn't there to steal the TV or look for jewelry. He was holding gallons of gasoline. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Leo wasn't just imagining things. He was dead right. Sarah hadn't planned a simple break-in. She had orchestrated an inferno. She wanted to burn the house down with us inside it. The accident, she mentioned on the phone, wasn't a car crash or fall. It was fire. I looked at my house, the place where I had taught Leo to ride his bike in the driveway, where Sarah and I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners. It looked so vulnerable now, a dark, wooden box waiting to be consumed. If I had driven into that driveway like a normal husband, if I had tucked Leo into bed and gone to sleep, we would have been waking up to smoke and flames right now. We would have been trapped. The man hefted the heavy cans, one in each hand, and began walking up the driveway toward our front porch. He moved silently, like a shadow detached from the night. He wasn't rushing. He thought he had all the time in the world because he thought his victims were already inside, asleep and unsuspecting. I felt Leo's small hand squeeze my arm again, his fingernails digging into my skin. "Dad," he squeaked, barely audible. He was going to the door. Panic finally pierced through my shock. I couldn't just sit there and watch my life turn to ash. I had to do something, and I had to do it fast. The nightmare wasn't a possibility anymore. It was walking up my front steps. My hands were shaking so violently that I almost dropped the phone between the seats. I forced myself to take a shallow breath and dialed those 3 numbers. 911. 911. What is your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos unraveling in my mind. I need police at 4202. Oakwood Drive immediately. I whispered, my eyes never leaving the figure on my porch. There's a man with gasoline canisters trying to set my house on fire. I think he's trying to kill us. Are you inside the house, sir? No, I said, glancing at Leo, who was curled into a ball on the seat. We're hiding down the street in a car, but he thinks we're inside. Stay where you are. Officers are already in the vicinity. Do not approach the suspect. The seconds that followed felt like hours. I watched in horror as the man unscrewed the cap of the first jerry can. He began splashing the liquid all over the front door, the welcome mat, and the wooden porch railing. Even from 100 yards away, I imagined I could smell the fumes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A lighter. Come on. I muttered through gritted teeth. Come on. Just as a flame flickered to life in his hand, the night exploded with light. 3 police cruisers screeched around the corner from the opposite end of the street, boxing the van in. They hadn't used their sirens. A silent approach to catch him in the act. The sudden blinding flash of red and blue strobes reflected off the wet pavement, turning the quiet suburban street into a chaotic scene. Police, drop it. Get on the ground. Now. The commands were roared over a loudspeaker. The man froze, the lighter still hovering inches from the gasoline-soaked wood. For a split second, I thought he was going to light it anyway, just to finish the job. But seeing the glint of service weapons drawn and aimed at his chest, he made the smart choice. He tossed the lighter into the wet grass and raised his hands. 2 officers tackled him instantly, forcing his face into the muddy lawn. It's over. I exhaled, feeling the adrenaline dump leave me weak. I put the car in drive and slowly rolled toward the house. As I pulled up, the officers were dragging the man to his feet. He was struggling, spitting, and screaming. I rolled down my window, just enough to hear him. He wasn't yelling about his rights or a lawyer. He was yelling at the empty air, unaware that I was watching. She lied, he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. She said they were asleep. Sarah said they wouldn't wake up. It was supposed to be easy. Hearing my wife's name come out of this stranger's mouth was a final nail in the coffin of my old life. The man wasn't just a random arsonist. He was an employee, and my wife was the boss. The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights, yellow caution tape, and the sterile hum of the precinct. I sat in a small, windowless interview room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Leo was in the next room, being looked after by a kind female officer who had given him hot cocoa and a blanket. I was grateful he didn't have to hear what was coming next. The door opened and Detective Miller walked in. He was a weary-looking man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much darkness. He didn't waste time with small talk. He sat down opposite me and slid a manila folder across the metal table. "We identified the man, Mark," Miller said, his voice grave. "His name is Ricky. He's not a professional assassin. He's a low-level ex-con with a drug problem. He cracked the moment we offered him a plea deal." I stared at the folder, afraid to open it. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would he want to burn us alive?" "He didn't want to," Miller corrected gently. "He was paid to. $5,000 up front, with another $5,000 promised after the job was done." Miller pulled out a stack of printed documents from the file. Bank statements, credit card records, betting slips. "Your wife didn't go to Chicago, Mark. She never even booked a flight." I felt the room spin. "What?" "Sarah has a serious problem," Miller continued, pointing to the numbers. "She's been hiding a massive online gambling addiction for years. Poker, sports betting, high-stakes slots. She's in the hole for over $300,000. She's desperate. The sharks she owes money to aren't the forgiving type." My stomach churned. The business trips, the late nights working. It was all a lie. I was married to a stranger. "And here's the kicker," Miller said, sliding one final paper toward me. "It was a copy of a life insurance policy. She took this out on you and Leo 30 days ago. It has a double indemnity clause for accidental death by fire. If that house had burned down with you two inside, she would have walked away with nearly $2 million. Enough to pay her debts and start over." I leaned back in the chair, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. She had put a price tag on our son's life. My wife, the mother who packed Leo's lunch every morning, had calculated exactly how much his death was worth to her. "Where is she?" I asked, a sudden rage replacing the shock. Miller looked at me dead in the eye. "She's not in Illinois. We tracked her burner phone. She's at the Starlight Motel, about 10 miles from here. She's waiting, Mark. She's sitting in a cheap motel room right now, watching the news, waiting to hear that her family has been incinerated." I thought I had hit rock bottom. I thought hearing that my wife was a gambling addict who wanted me dead for insurance money was the absolute worst news I could receive that night. But Detective Miller wasn't finished. He hesitated, looking down at his notes as if he wasn't sure he should tell me the rest. That hesitation terrified me more than anything else. "What is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. What else could there possibly be? Miller sighed and leaned forward. "We sent a patrol unit to verify her location at the Starlight Motel. They spotted her car in the lot, but it wasn't the only vehicle parked in front of room 104. He tapped a grainy black and white photo on the table. It was a license plate capture from a traffic cam near the motel. I recognized the plate immediately. It belonged to a silver Lexus. "That belongs to Dave," I said, confused. "Dave Reynolds, my business partner." "Exactly," Miller said. My brain tried to scramble for a logical explanation. Maybe Dave had found out. Maybe he was there trying to talk her out of it. Maybe he was there to save me. "Mark," Miller said softly, shattering my hope. "We intercepted text messages between them. They aren't arguing. They're celebrating. They ordered champagne an hour ago." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Dave, my best friend since college. The man who stood next to me at the altar as my best man. The man who was a godfather to my son. He wasn't just there. He was with her. "It turns out Sarah isn't the only one in debt," Miller explained, his voice clinical but pitying. "We did a quick audit of your company accounts. Dave has been siphoning money for months. He's bankrupting your business. If you died, the partnership agreement triggers a key man insurance payout. The company gets $3 million. Dave gets full control. I felt bile rise in my throat. It was a double homicide of my soul. My wife and my best friend had been sleeping together, laughing behind my back, and plotting my execution. While I was working late to fix the company's mysterious losses, Dave was stealing from me. While I was planning family vacations, Sarah was planning my funeral. They were in that motel room right now, probably toasting to their future, a future built on my ashes. They think they've won. I muttered, my hands clenching into fists so tight my fingernails drew blood. They think I'm burning right now. Miller nodded slowly. That gives us an advantage. They don't know you're alive, and they don't know we're coming for them. Detective Miller looked at his watch. It was nearing 10 p.m. The local news hadn't reported the attempted arson yet, because the police had enforced a strict media blackout. As far as Sarah and Dave knew, the plan was still in motion. The house should be going up in flames any minute now. We need to cement the evidence, Mark, Miller said, sliding my cell phone back across the table. We know they did it, but we need to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she expects you to die tonight. We need to catch her in the lie. He instructed me to send a text, a specific one designed to force her hand. My fingers felt like lead as I unlocked the screen. Her contact photo was still a picture of us smiling at a beach in Maui last summer. It made me sick. I typed the message Miller dictated. Honey, I can't sleep. I think I smell gas coming from the basement. I'm going down to check the pilot light. Love you. I hit send. The room fell silent. We all stared at the phone sitting on the metal table, waiting. If she was innocent, she would call me immediately. She would scream at me to get out. She would drive home at breakneck speed. 30 seconds later, the phone buzzed. It was a text. Mark, OMG, get out of there now. Call 911. Don't go in the basement. On the surface, it looked like the frantic text of a worried wife. But Miller wasn't looking at my phone. He was looking at a large monitor on the wall that displayed a GPS map of the city. A blinking red dot represented Sarah's phone. Watch this, Miller said, his voice hard. The red dot began to move, but it didn't move south toward our house to save us. It moved north, fast. She was merging onto the highway, headed straight for the international terminal. She's not coming to save you, Mark, Miller said, shaking his head with disgust. She's establishing an alibi. She told you to get out so she can tell the police. She tried to warn you, but she's running away. She knows the explosion is coming, and she's clearing the blast radius. That text message was a final severing of my marriage. She didn't want to save me. She just wanted to make sure she looked good for the insurance adjusters after they found my body. Let's go, Miller said, grabbing his radio. Units are already in position. We're going to give your wife the surprise of her life. I rode in the back of an unmarked police cruiser, speeding toward the very same airport where I had kissed my wife goodbye that morning. It felt like a lifetime ago. The rain had stopped, leaving the tarmac glistening under the harsh orange glow of the streetlights. We didn't go to the main entrance. The officers escorted me through a side door, flashing their badges to TSA agents, bypassing the long lines. They led me to a private observation room with a one-way mirror overlooking the departure gate for the red-eye flight to Cancun, Mexico. And there they were. Sarah and Dave were sitting close together in the waiting area. They weren't crying. They weren't frantically checking their phone for news about a gas leak or a fire. They were smiling. Dave had his arm draped casually over the back of Sarah's chair, and she was sipping a latte, looking more relaxed than I had seen her in months. They looked like a couple on a honeymoon, not two people who had just orchestrated the murder of a husband and a child. They're boarding in 5 minutes, Detective Miller whispered into his radio. Move in. I watched as 6 uniformed officers emerged from the crowd, converging on them from all sides. The transformation on their faces was instant. The smiles vanished, replaced by confusion, then shock. Dave tried to stand up, puffing out his chest, probably about to pull the "Do you know who I am?" card. But before he could get a word out, he was shoved against the wall and cuffed. Sarah screamed. It was a shrill, piercing sound that made heads turn all across the terminal. She was pointing at the officers, playing the victim, shouting that there had been a mistake. Then Miller gave the signal. He opened the door to the observation room and motioned for me to step out onto the balcony overlooking the gate. "Sarah," I called out. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. She froze. The officers paused, letting her turn around. She looked up and saw me standing there, alive and unharmed. I expected her to crumble. I expected her to weep, to beg for forgiveness, to claim she was forced into it. But she didn't. When she realized her plan had failed, that I wasn't burning in a basement, but standing above her as her judge, her face contorted. The mask of the loving wife dropped completely. She didn't look at me with regret. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Her eyes were cold, dead shark's eyes. She wasn't sorry she tried to kill me. She was furious that I had survived. "You ruined everything," she shrieked, struggling against the officer holding her. "You were supposed to be dead. You're worth nothing alive, Mark. Nothing." Dave just hung his head in defeat, but Sarah kept screaming obscenities until they dragged her out of the terminal. I stood there, trembling, not from fear, but from the chilling realization that I had slept next to a monster for 10 years. The woman I loved was a fiction. The real Sarah was the one being hauled away in handcuffs, screaming about money. I turned away from the railing. It was over. The cancer was cut out. Now, I had to go home and tell my son that he was a hero. It has been exactly 12 months since that night at the airport. I don't live in Seattle anymore. I couldn't stay in that house, not after knowing what it was supposed to become. I sold it, packed up whatever memories were real, and moved Leo and myself down to a small, quiet town in Bend, Oregon. The legal battle was messy, but brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Between Ricky's confession, the text messages, and the financial trail, the jury didn't take long. Sarah and Dave are currently serving 25 years each in state prison. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need closure from them. I had already closed that book the moment I walked away from the terminal. Instead, I focused on the only thing that mattered: rebuilding a life for the little boy who saved mine. Pause for effect. I'm watching Leo right now. He's down by the river behind our new cabin, skipping rocks across the water. He's laughing. For a while, he had nightmares. He would wake up screaming that the house was on fire. But with therapy, time, and a lot of fishing trips, the light has returned his eyes. He's just a kid again, not a guardian angel carrying the weight of the world. Looking back, I realize how close I came to losing everything. I was so blinded by the illusion of a perfect marriage that I missed the cracks in the foundation. I was sleepwalking through my life. It took the pure, unfiltered intuition of an 8-year-old to wake me up. People often tell me, "I'm so sorry you lost your wife." But I tell them, I didn't lose a wife that night. I lost an assassin. What I gained was a second chance. I gained the realization that family isn't defined by a marriage certificate, but by loyalty, protection, and love. Leo didn't just warn me about a fire. He saved my soul. He taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to walk away from everything you think you want to protect the things you actually need. Tonight, when I tuck him into bed, I'm going to hug him a little tighter. And I'm going to promise him, like I do every night, that he is safe. Because as long as I have breath in my lungs, no one will ever hurt him again. We made it out of the fire, and we are forging a future that is brighter than any flame could ever be. Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. For a long time, I blamed myself. I laid awake at night wondering how I could have been so blind. How could I share a bed with someone for a decade and not see the darkness inside them? I felt stupid. I felt broken. But then, one afternoon, Leo walked up to me while I was fixing the porch railing. He handed me a glass of lemonade and said, "Dad, you didn't know because you are good. Bad people know how to hide. Good people don't look for things that aren't there." That was the moment I finally forgave myself. We have a new rule in our house now: no secrets. We talk about everything, the good, the bad, and the scary. And we adopted a golden retriever named Buster, who sleeps at the foot of Leo's bed every night. I may have lost my faith in marriage for a while, but I found something much stronger, an unbreakable bond with my son. We are survivors. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that the truth always finds a way to the surface. Sometimes it just needs a little whisper to be heard. That brings us to the end of Mark and Leo's incredible journey. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least. Now, I have a question for you, the Inspiration Seeker family. Have you ever had a gut feeling or a warning from a child that saved you from a bad situation? I want to hear your stories. Drop a comment down below. Your experience might just help someone else trust their instincts when it matters most. If you enjoyed this narration, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that inspires, shocks, and moves you. I'm your host, signing off. Remember, keep your eyes open, listen to the little ones, and stay safe out there. See you in the next video.